back to the football forecast. I know it's been a while. I did not anticipate it taking that long for me to get all of the wide receiver information, all the data in, looked at, congested, sorted out. So finally, after rooting through all the numbers, I think that I finally am ready to display my fantasy football rankings for this year's wide receivers. So basically, I've got stats on 92 guys, but because of the attention spans and because I really don't want episodes or any of the shows to be longer than 30 minutes, I know the first couple were, I'm going to try to keep it shorter. I'm going to break the wide receivers down into 3 separate shows. So this first one, we're just going to be focusing on wide receivers 1s and 2s. So I pretty much base everything off of a 12-man league. It seems to be more common, at least more competitive for the people that really want to dig in. 8 teams and 10 teams in your league's nice, but everybody is going to have ridiculously good teams. You don't have to dive as deep, which I don't like. So I base my 1s and my 2s off of 12 teams. So we're looking at, in this show, just the top 24 wide receivers. And something actually caught me off guard when I was actually going through and doing the rankings. Either A, I didn't take as many risks on the wide receivers and I was a little bit more cookie cutter compared to the consensus ranking, or B, the wide receivers at the top have really just separated themselves that much more. Typically, you know who the top dogs are in the running, as far as the running backs are concerned. This year, I don't really feel like that's the case. I feel like there's a lot more variation, at least with these top guys, on the running backs versus the wide receivers. So let's go ahead and get into it. I'm going to go ahead and display the top 4 receivers to get started. And what you're going to be able to look at here, from left to right, I'll just go ahead and say it. So my rank is obviously where I place them. My value is where I think that they are best valued as it compares to the consensus ADP and the consensus ranking. So you'll see the average ADP round/pick, which is the 4th column. So the 1.03 that you see next to CeeDee Lamb, that means that on average, the consensus is saying that he is the 1st round, 3rd pick on average. Then directly to the right of that, you'll see displayed the ADP round range. And this is where you're seeing the earliest that player was taken and the latest that player was taken. So I am comparing my value column to the average ADP round and pick. So yes, everybody pretty much has these 4 guys as their top 4 guys. I do as well. And I only have one mix-up as it compares to the consensus ranking. So number 1 is CeeDee Lamb. The reason that I gave him the edge in targets, because these statistics are based on last year, is because if you look at the vacated targets, 24%, almost a quarter of their total targets, those receivers or running backs have now left the Cowboys. So assuming that he can get his contract figured out, I expect a lot more volume to come his way. The Dallas Cowboys also throw the ball the 8th most in the NFL, which gives him the slight edge over Tyreek. But really, honestly, CD and Tyreek are the 2 top dogs. No questions asked. Tyreek is more productive across the board if you're just looking at his stats as it compares to last year. The only reason that I gave CD the slight nod, even though he is going through a bit of a contract issue, is because overall Dallas throws the ball more than the Miami Dolphins do, and the Dallas Cowboys as a whole have more vacated targets that have now left Dallas. So obviously that puts us at number 2 with Tyreek. I mean, he's right there with them, just under 11 targets a game. He's slightly ahead of them in receiving yards and total statistics. He's only caught 1 less touchdown, but honestly, I don't put a whole lot of stock into touchdowns because you can have a receiver that has 8 catches all year long and has 3 touchdowns and would technically tie for like 25th in the NFL. So I don't put a whole lot of stock into that, but that is nice to give them a slight edge as it compares to overall production. The main thing that I'm looking at when it comes to separating these wide receivers is targets, number 1. Number 2, I'm looking at how often do they throw the ball as an offense? Which leads me to number 3. How has their situation changed? Not just with receivers coming and going, but with new quarterbacks coming in, what degree or what caliber of wide receivers are coming and going. There's a lot that goes into the situation ranking, but overall, that's what I'm looking at. And then lastly, I do want to know last year's statistics. So on the far right, you'll see opportunities plus yards plus touchdowns. Think of that as like a power score or like an index score. So if you're just looking at these top 4 guys, it obviously falls off pretty dramatically if you're looking at that as like a power index score going from 135, 137 down to 116 and 91. So Amon-Ra St. Brown, I gave him the edge over Jamar Chase, primarily because he's got more targets and his quarterback is healthy more often. Jared Goff has proven himself to be not only a consistent, reliable quarterback in the NFL, but unfortunately, Joe Burrow has just seemingly his body is just failing him, and it hasn't been anything super dramatic. I mean, that wrist injury that Joe Burrow had last year, that's going to haunt him the rest of his life. I watch Pat McAfee every day. A.J. Hawk said that he had a similar wrist injury, and it still bothers him to this day. So that's going to be something lingering with Joe Burrow. But he just always seems to be banged up over these last couple of years. So I only give the slight nod to Amon-Ra St. Brown because of the having slightly more targets per game and an overall more healthy quarterback. Now, Jamar Chase is nowhere near the top as far as anything last year's concerned. Last year's an absolute it's a wash as far as I'm concerned when I'm looking at Jamar Chase's numbers. We know what Jamar Chase is, okay? This dude's the real deal, okay? If Joe Burrow can stay on the football field, then there's no question that Jamar Chase is going to have a spectacular year. Over the first 3 seasons of his NFL career, he ranks top 7 in all-time history in yards receiving. So there's no questions asked that Jamar Chase is elite. There's no doubt in my mind. Not to mention, when you look at his vacated target percentage, the Bengals have lost 42% of their targets as it compares to last season. So that's a huge number, and honestly, the sky's the limit as far as this Bengals offense is concerned. Can Joe Burrow stay healthy? So I'm going to go ahead and display the rest of the top 12. And first thing that you're going to see is going to be a little bit of a surprise here. I've got Garrett Wilson up there. Again, I don't put too much stock into his statistics from last season. When you're looking at Garrett Wilson with Aaron Rodgers, his target share can't really get that much higher. He's already almost to 10 targets per game. But honestly, when you have a quarterback that can't push the football down the field like they had last season, and your offense is kind of a dink and dunk crapshoot, that's going to result in high targets to your best player and low yardage. So if you look at his receiving yards per game, you're looking at 61 yards per game. I expect that number to climb exponentially. Not only that, but his touchdowns. If Aaron Rodgers can stay on the football field, he is a bad, bad man, and he is going to have, in my opinion, I'm just going to say it, I've already got a future bet on it. I think Aaron Rodgers is going to have an MVP type of year, and Garrett Wilson is going to be at the head of that. Not much else has changed in New York. The only reason that I have his situation arrow pointed up is because Rodgers is back. Thank God. So next surprise, you're going to see Justin Jefferson drop. Justin Jefferson is without a doubt top 5 talent in the NFL as far as wide receivers go. And it's hard to say that, honestly, because there are so many freaks at the wide receiver position. Honestly, the position is loaded, and I can see why now more than ever before you're seeing an increase in wide receivers drafted in the first round or 2 compared to running backs. Not that running backs haven't lost their value. They're still the most important position in fantasy football because they do so much PPR-wise, not just running the football, but catching out of the backfield. That's the stuff that you're looking for. That's what separates them. But with these receivers, I mean, they're just loaded. They're absolutely loaded with talent. But in my opinion, Justin Jefferson is a top 5 talent. When you're looking at the receiver position, Minnesota lost 28% of their target share, and Justin Jefferson is top 5 in statistics already. If he had J.J. McCarthy or Kirk Cousins throwing him the football, I would have put him in my top 4. I probably would have bumped Jamar Chase back. But with Sam Darnold being the guy in Minnesota for sure over the course of the season, and who knows what happens to him and how far the drop at the QB position is after that, God forbid. But Justin Jefferson, just the quarterbacks alone, the question marks there, sets his ceiling back and his floor back, frankly, tremendously. Next, you've got A.J. Brown. A.J. Brown in Philadelphia. Not a whole lot has changed there. Actually, they've opened up 22% of their target share. He was top 5 in pretty much every statistical category that you can look at. The only reason that I have him like a slight dip in his, not only my ranking, but also his situation, is because they add Saquon Barkley, and Saquon Barkley is more dominant than any running back that they've had that I can think of for recent memory. I think that Saquon Barkley gives their offense a new dynamic. I think that they can lean more heavy on the R part of the RPO. I think that they're really going to run him a lot, and then that is going to open up more. So I think with A.J. Brown, you're going to see less targets, but potentially the same volume as far as yards and touchdowns go. It's just a slight dip there with his PPR stats. I don't think he's going to be catching, 7.5, 8 balls a game. So just a little bit of a slight dip there for A.J. Brown, but still definitely worth a late first round, early second round draft pick. Next, I've got Puka Nacua. He's ranked 8th, just like he is with the consensus. I do think that right here you're getting your first receiver starting to bleed into the second round. Late first, I've seen some people reaching. People are reaching. I've got the range here, the last pick of the first round, but I've actually seen people in my mock drafts drafting Puka Nacua as high as 8th or 9th overall. But not really anything has changed in Los Angeles. I think that the whole crew's back. The only thing that has changed slightly for Puka Nacua is that Cooper Kupp, hopefully, is back healthy. And I think people forgot exactly who the hell Cooper Kupp is. And I think Cooper Kupp is going to regain a little bit more of his wide receiver 1 status as he's listed to be. Puka Nacua is listed technically as their second receiver. Doesn't really matter. You're going to have 2 receivers on the field at all times. So it's not as important as it being like an RB2 situation. But maybe a little bit of a dip, but honestly, not much has changed in LA, so I do expect him to be pretty much right here where he should be, late first, early second round. I have him probably closer to the second round. Next is Marvin Harrison Jr., and this is straight potential. This straight up potential. I think he's a generational talent. If you watch what he did at Ohio State, he's a freak. I am actually surprised that he didn't sit out the whole last season, similar to like Jamar Chase did at LSU. I hope is not wasted in Arizona. But I'm glad that he didn't get hurt at Ohio State, and he was able to turn his collegiate success into being a high first-round draft pick. A little bit unfortunate that he goes to Arizona with Kyler Murray. I think he holds his potential back a little bit. But I think his freakishly God-given abilities alone, and the fact that Arizona has lost 39% of their targets from last season, are no longer with that team. So not only are a lot of targets opened up, but the guy's a freak. So I know that they're going to force feed him the football. I've got him ranked at the 9th spot purely based on potential alone. Now we're moving to Devontae Adams. This was a little bit more of a reach as far as where I have him being drafted, even though the ranking is the same. So right now they've got Devontae Adams being drafted between the 5th pick of the second round and the 3rd pick of the 3rd round. His average ADP is the 8th pick of the second round. So that's really what I'm looking at here. And if you look, I've got him going between the 13th and 17th overall pick, which would be maxed out at the 5th round or the 5th pick of the second round. And the reason for that is I want to reach on Devontae here because it was very obvious if you watch that wide receiver show that Peyton Manning produced with NFL Films that Devontae Adams was visibly frustrated. And the only reason that he didn't demand a trade is because I think that he believes that AP and is going to find a way to design an offense and get them a quarterback that's going to be able to get him the ball at the clip that he expects it to be. Davante Adams made it very clear he expects to be great. He doesn't just want to win; he wants to win pretty. And in his opinion, winning pretty is by giving him the damn football because he is one of the best wide receivers on the planet. So I think that Minshew finally getting an opportunity as a QB1 here in Las Vegas. He took over the spot from Aiden O'Connell. I think that with Minshew being upgraded to the QB1 in Las Vegas really, really helps Davante Adams' case here. He was pretty much top 10 to 20 across the board in all statistics. But he was, even last year, he was fourth in target share. And again, that's a lot of dink and dunks. It's a similar situation to Garrett Wilson. When you don't have the quarterback play, you're going to force feed your best receiver. So you see the 10.29 targets per game, but only the 67 yards per game. It's a lot of short routes. Minshew's going to scramble around. He's going to get the defense running a little bit crazy. He is a very improv-based quarterback. I think that Davante Adams is going to see a lot more open seams and have a more quality quarterback to deliver the ball to those spots for him. Next, I've got Nico Collins. Nico Collins also took a little bit of a jump. As far as I'm concerned, I'm going to reach a little bit here. His average ADP has him going halfway through the third round. I'm looking to take him before the second round is up if there's not a better running back. I mean, to be honest with you, I am a running back first guy. I'm not going to jump up and grab Nico Collins, but if you covet the wide receiver, Nico Collins is worth jumping up and grabbing right there. Yes, Houston gets Stephon Diggs from Buffalo, but unlike Buffalo, Diggs ain't the man there. Diggs ain't going to be shit as far as, like, when he walks in the locker room, they're not just going to go, oh, shit, Stephon Diggs is here. Like, no. Tank Dell, Nico Collins, Dalton Schultz, C.J. Stroud, they know what they're doing there. They have a plan. Diggs is just going to be an additional weapon for them as opposed to being the guy in the locker room. So hopefully he doesn't cause too much drama there. Either way, even with the slight dip from Nico Collins, maybe Stephon Diggs is going to start attracting the number one corner on these teams as opposed to Nico Collins having to go up against these number one corners. So, I mean, he is listed as the wide receiver 2. Stephon Diggs is listed as the number 1, so we'll see. But I think that you're going to see a lot more favorable matchups with Nico Collins, even if his target share dips a hair. So I really like Nico Collins here. C.J. Stroud's the man, dude. He's the man. I mean, you can believe in C.J. Stroud. Next, I've got Drake London. I'm telling you, this is the last fucking time, and y'all know that I'm a Falcons fan. This is the last fucking time that I'm putting his name anywhere near the second or third round. After this year, if this shit don't work out with Kirk Cousins, frankly, if he gets hurt, Michael Penix Jr. comes in. This is the first time that he's had a quality quarterback since he's been there. The hype has been completely trash. The hype with Kyle Pitts, and we're going to get to tight ends eventually before the season starts for sure. The lack of quality quarterbacks since these guys have been drafted has hurt their stock so bad. But if he cannot manage to put up higher production than top 35, top 45, I mean, very mid-ass numbers, if he cannot figure out a way to muster up more production than that with Kirk Cousins throwing him the football, or I don't give a damn if it ends up being Michael Penix Jr., not to mention they lost 36% of their target share. If he can't muster up more production than what he's been doing, then I give up on him. So this is the last time. I put him at the back end, very last back end wide receiver 1. Based on hype from 4 fucking years ago, because Kirk is there. I believe in Kirk, Captain Kirk. I've been a huge fan of Kirk Cousins. Me and Chris in my league, we've gone back and forth 100 times about Kirk. I don't care what his primetime record is. Kirk Cousins can ball, okay? He's going to be the reason that you win 10 games. He might also be the reason that you lose 7 of them, but who cares? He's a winning quarterback, productive quarterback. He knows how to play the position. He's going to push the ball down the field. Next, I've got Michael Pittman Jr. This is pretty much based on target volume alone. It doesn't matter who's throwing him the football. Michael Pittman Jr. is a target monster. He's averaging, and once you start getting down into this is the first wide receiver 2. He's the only wide receiver 2. There's like 3 guys that averaged over 9.5 targets last season, and he's one of them. But unlike Keenan Allen and unlike Stephon Diggs, his situation didn't change at all. Even though AR is looking to be back and healthy, you can't even look at Michael Pittman Jr.'s target share last year being so high because AR wasn't there. Because when AR was there, when Anthony Richardson was throwing the football, he actually averaged 10 to 11, like 10.5, 11 targets per game the first 4 weeks of the season before Richardson went down. So, but he's a volume monster. I don't care what his yards per game is. I don't care that he only had 4 touchdowns. Michael Pittman is definitely worth a high-end wide receiver 2 spot on your roster. Number 14 is the same number 14 as the consensus. I think that you take him exactly where he's supposed to go, maybe a little early, high-end round 3. Looking at Mike Evans, okay? Mike Evans is the definition of a consistent receiver, okay? And honestly, I'm having flashbacks to Larry Fitzgerald. I've been doing fantasy forever. I mean, you see some of the names on my wall back here. I've been doing it since my dad was keeping it on paper with we were drafting Priest Holmes and Marshall Faulk and shit, Kurt Warner. But Mike Evans is giving me Larry Fitzgerald flashbacks because, same as Larry Fitzgerald, I just did not think that it was possible for him to continue to sustain the high level of not just volume but production. So when I say volume, I'm talking about the number of opportunities, the number of targets as it compares to the target share on the football team. When I say production, I'm talking about yards, touchdowns. This dude's a freak. He's had 10 straight 1,000-yard seasons out of 10. He's spent 10 seasons in the NFL, all of which were with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, none of which until last year when they made the playoffs were really successful seasons. Multiple quarterbacks, different coaches, doesn't matter. Mike Evans is the damn definition of consistency. 10 straight 1,000-yard seasons is ridiculous, and until he shows me otherwise, I can't drop him. I can't move him, and I'm not going to do what I did with Larry Fitzgerald and avoid him. I just can't do it. We'll get to my number 15 wide receiver, Chris Olave. I've got him going slightly later than his average ADP. His average ADP is the second to last pick of the second round. I'm going to wait till the third round, and that's only because I don't like Derek Carr. Take that back. Derek Carr's okay. I don't like the system in New Orleans. I think it's boring. I said that before when I talked about the running back and the quarterback episode. Those fantasy projection shows. Chris Olave is no doubt the number one weapon from the wide receiver position, but that offense runs through Alvin Kamara, okay? And that's the only reason that I have a slight dip. I believe because nothing else has changed as far as the situation is concerned. I think that you can trust that 8.5 targets per game. I think that you can trust that 75 yards a game. Every now and then he'll get you a touchdown. That's cool. But honestly, I expect his volume and everything to pretty much stay the same. But don't get it twisted. It's Alvin Kamara's show down there in New Orleans. So next that brings us to Deebo Samuel. And Deebo Samuel's actually flip-flopped with Brandon Ayuk. And when you look at the consensus rankings, well, actually on here, the latest update that I made has Deebo Samuel ranked 15th and Brandon Ayuk 17th. But if you look at most of these mock drafts and you look at where a lot of people are actually taking them, I think Brandon Ayuk is going ahead of Deebo Samuel the majority of those. And if you also look at his ADP round range, Deebo Samuel, the earliest that you're seeing him go is the third pick of the third round, where you're seeing Brandon Ayuk going as early as the 10th pick of the second round. So a lot of people are reaching for Brandon Ayuk, but I guess the consensus overall does have Deebo ranked slightly ahead, and that's where he should be. I do struggle with his targets per game. He's getting almost a whole target less than Brandon Ayuk, despite clearly being the number one go-to weapon on this team. And what hurts him fantasy-wise, the only reason that he's not in my top 10 or top 12, because trust me, I'd love to push Drake London the hell out of the top top 12. The only reason that he's not there is because of his target share, because they use him way too much in the running game, and that hurts his PPR stock. Now, if it's a non-PPR league, then you can move him up. But in a PPR league, I want to see those targets. I like those points. It's cheap, easy points. His volume's got to go up in order for me to push him up into the wide receiver 1 range. Cooper Kupp, just talked about him when we talked about Puka Nacua. I think that he's being drafted exactly where he should go, halfway through the 3rd round to the end of the 3rd round. I like Cooper Kupp there. Nothing's changed in LA. Puka Nacua and him are the go-to. That's a well-balanced offense with a great quarterback, a great play caller in Sean McVay. Kyron Williams is still going to see a bulk of the share of the load, but people forgot about Cooper Kupp. He missed a few games last season, about 4 or 5 football games he was out last year. I hope that he comes back and reminds everybody who the hell he was, because 3 years ago, he was a top 5 receiver in the NFL, and I would actually argue that 3 to 4 years ago, he was the number 1 receiver in the NFL. So love that Cooper Kupp's back. I hope that he can stay healthy this season. Brings us to the next receiver, which is Brandon Ayuk. We just talked about him as it compares to Deebo Samuel. I love his, for a wide receiver too, he's kind of on the low end as far as the target share go, but when you look at the San Francisco offense and Kyle Shanahan and all the weapons that he has, I mean, if you had that many toys to play with, how do you not use them all? You got Kittle and McCaffrey. Brock Purdy does a great job of keeping everything spread around. But there's just too many mouths to feed, so I get that. I'm not going to knock him for that. The only reason that I do have a slight dip here in his value as far as drafting him goes is primarily because I don't think that he can sustain that 15 to 20 yards per catch. I mean, he's a home run hitter every single time he touches the football. Most receivers, I don't have his number of receptions per game pulled up, but most receivers are only catching 67% of their targets roughly. So you can pretty much take his targets at 6.56, and we'll just call it 5 receptions per game, probably about what it is. And then when you divide 83 yards per game by 5, I mean, you're looking at 16 yards per reception, and that's an extremely high number. I think that there's like some crazy stat where like 75% of his catches last year were for first downs or touchdowns. That's just a little freakish. I think that he's a little bit of an oddball statistically last year. Do still expect a lot of success. Obviously, I got him as a wide receiver 2 here, but can he really sustain that same level of home run hits per reception? I'm just not sure. The next one's an obvious dip for me. DJ Moore was the only receiver really that they had in Chicago last season. I mean, you could throw Darnell Mooney out there. You could throw some of these other guys out there. They had some running backs that were in and out. You get Khalil Herbert and Roschon Johnson. I mean, they kind of had a plethora of weapons, but ultimately the only thing good that Chicago's offense did last season was Justin Fields running the football and then occasionally throwing bombs to DJ Moore. I expect his target share to plummet. I expect his yards to plummet. I expect his touchdowns to plummet. He was a top 10 receiver in all categories pretty much last season, and despite losing 21% of their target share from last year, you add Keenan Allen, you draft Rome Odunze, you get a better quarterback who doesn't just panic and throw it to his number 1 guy. Caleb Williams going to spread the football around. Chicago no longer revolves around DJ Moore. So an obvious slight bump here for me. You're still seeing his ADP reflecting that. I think most fantasy players are smart enough to realize that. He, despite being a top 10 receiver categorically last season across the board statistically, DJ Moore is going in the 4th round, and that's as early as I'm willing to pick him as well. Next, that brings us to Amari Cooper. Amari Cooper is not sexy. Nothing about the Browns' offense is sexy. I would love it if, in a perfect world, you had a healthy Deshaun Watson. No legal issue, Deshaun Watson. I wish that we had a healthy Nick Chubb. I wonder what that offense would really look like. But we just didn't get lucky enough to get that. And there's too many question marks at the quarterback position, to be honest with you. Never should have signed a deal like that for Deshaun Watson. That's 100% on the Cleveland organization. but that's not Amari Cooper's fault. Ultimately, I wish Joe Flacco would have stayed in Cleveland and just taken over as the number one guy, but it really doesn't matter. Amari Cooper is by far their best weapon because I don't expect Nick Chubb to be on the field very often. The next best receiver on this football team is Jerry Jeudy and Elijah Moore. And I don't really expect too much from them. I don't think much is going to dip into Amari Cooper statistically and year in and year out, regardless of who's throwing him the football, regardless of what coach Cleveland has. They change quarterbacks and coaches like it's dirty underwear. It doesn't matter who's there. Amari Cooper's a top 20 receiver. You can take it to the bank. Easy top 20 receiver. No problem. So I like Amari Cooper right there. I actually take him a little bit earlier than he's going. I'm willing to reach for him a little bit here. His average ADP is late 5th round. I'd take him in the 4th if, there weren't better options out there. But I do like Amari Cooper going as high as the 4th round. That brings us to my number 22 receiver, and that's Stephon Diggs, and we just talked about it. Simply put, he was a top 15 receiver last season in pretty much all categories. But what I don't expect this year, again, he's not going to be the man. There's no way that he sees 9.5 targets per game, even though they're going to air it out. I mean, he's going to an offense that throws the ball. They have the 12th most passing attempts in the National Football League. He's going to a team, though, that didn't lose much. And then really the only thing they did was get healthier. Tank Dell is hopefully back. He missed a lot of games last season. I really like Stephon Diggs in this offense, but not a top 10 receiver statistically this year. His target share goes way down. So he might be on a more winning football team this year, and that's good for him. But being the diva that he is, he wants those touches, and sorry, honey, you ain't going to get them. So I like him as a low-end wide receiver 2 still, just regardless because of his talent alone. But I do not expect the same production that you saw last season. My second to last wide receiver 2 is DK Metcalf. He is the clear-cut number 1 in Seattle. He's getting 7.5 targets per game. They didn't lose much, which is why I really like DK here. I kind of just like the safe pick, the safety of DK Metcalf. His ADP is perfect. He's going early to mid 4th round. That's exactly where I have him going. What I like about Seattle is they're not sexy, but they're consistent. They're reliable. You know what you're getting. Geno Smith is not a elite quarterback by any means, but he can get the job done. They do have 2 other guys in Jackson Smith-Njigba and Tyler Lockett. Tyler Lockett's a target machine. But Geno does a really good job in that offense, sharing the wealth, despite, having a quality running game with Kenneth Walker as well. So I just like the consistency of DK Metcalf here, and I like the fact that pretty much nothing around him has changed. I do expect the yardage. I would expect a little bit more yards and a little bit more touchdowns for a big guy. I mean, he's basically the second coming of Megatron when you look at him physically. To only have 8 touchdowns to me is a little bit of a question mark, a little bit of a head scratcher because he's so big. He should have at least 10 to 15 touchdowns per year based on size and red zone targets alone. So expect a little bit of a bump there for him statistically. The last pick that I would make as my wide receiver 2 is Malik Neighbors, and again, this is 100% on potential alone. When you look at the New York Giants offense, they were ranked 26th in pass attempts. I expect that to change. Two things. Daniel Jones is healthy again, even though I think Daniel Jones is trash. Got a trash contract, a lucky-ass season where, honestly, they paid him for a couple runs in the playoffs. Like, that's what it is. When you boil it down, the reason that Daniel Jones got paid is because he had a couple good runs for first downs in the playoffs, and they won a playoff game. So, regardless, he's back. He's better than Tommy, whatever the hell, the Italian boy that they had throwing the football last year. He's better than Tommy. But the Giants offense threw the ball 26th most in the NFL, or otherwise put 6th least in the NFL. So last season, not only did they have Daniel Jones go down, but they had Saquon Barkley. He's a workhorse. He's like a Derrick Henry type where you can just feed him the ball. And let your offense ride through him. They don't have Saquon Barkley anymore. Obviously, Daniel Jones is back and healthy. He is the franchise quarterback, whether I like it or not. I do expect Malik Neighbors. He's going to walk right in there. First-round draft pick out of LSU, one of the most dynamic, explosive offenses in college football. He's going to be the immediate number one. He's going to get the immediate target shares. The next receivers that you have on this offense, Darius Slayton and Wan'Dale Robinson. Darius Slayton's been in the league a long time. He's been consistent, no doubt about it. Wan'Dale Robinson is lightning in a bottle. Watched him a lot at UK. He's freak talent, but again, health issues. The injury bugs kind of clipped him a little bit. Malik Neighbors is going to be the number one guy in New York. So just based on potential alone and losing that workhorse at the running back position, getting the franchise quarterback healthy again, I expect Malik Neighbors to be able to potentially carry top 20, top 25 statistics from a receiver standpoint. So that's going to round out the top 24. That rounds out all the wide receiver ones and wide receiver twos. Obviously, there's a shitload of names left on the board that I got to get to, but I think overall, these are all the guys that you should be taking within the first 4, maybe 5 rounds, depending on how your draft's going. Again, I hope some of these guys push back into the 5th and 6th round, personally, because I like to go running back heavy early. There's a couple other guys in other positions that might be worth jumping up there for, tight ends and quarterback-wise. But overall, I think everybody's pretty much where they should be. So when you go down the line here, and I didn't really talk too much about the average ADPs versus my ADPs, but pretty much everything's spot on. Everything's cookie cutter, like I said in the beginning of the video. Maybe slight marginal differences here and there, but overall, if you're looking at the value, I got the first 13 wide receivers listed to the pick, like exact pick range, and then the last 11 guys pretty much just mixed them up between round 3 and round 4. So you figure about 6 receivers a round are going to go, maybe 5 running backs, and then pick a quarterback and a tight end here or there. So that's pretty much what your first 4 rounds are going to look like. So I think it's pretty comfortable that these guys fall in this range. I think that these are the clear and obvious top 24 receivers. The next 2 to 3, maybe you could argue belong in here, but I think a lot of these guys are separating themselves. So excited to give you all part 2 of this. The next time that I put a show out is going to be on the receivers as well, and we're going to look at your wide receiver 3s and wide receiver 4s. So that's obviously going to cover all the wide receivers ranked between the 25th and 48th on my big board here. So hopefully you like the statistics. Hopefully you're seeing the analysis as far as the reasoning behind where I'm separating some of these guys. A lot of this shit's close, and a lot of this stuff depends on health, what doesn't. But assuming the perfect case scenario for each one of these guys and a perfect quarterback, I keep looking at this and I wouldn't change a thing. So thank you for watching, and I'll have part 2 out soon. So.
How you play the game with the people that writing the rules? Ain't the fame that I'm after when paying the dues. I've been through the pain that's reflected in the attitude. Might be winning now, but the thing is that I had to lose. So go and tell me what you really want to do. And lonely at the top, cause there ain't a lot of room. Ain't no other option, that's all I ever knew. So I'ma get it poppin', you know how I'ma do. I've been down through the blood and the sweat. Guarantee you can know I'm a threat. I've been down through the blood and the sweat, and I ain't close to being done yet, I'm going on.